Hillary Clinton and the rest of the Democrats are afraid of an armed population. Donald Trump goes for the Hail Mary after a week from hell for his campaign. And we talk about why a secular government is dangerous for our Constitution. This is the Wise Conservative Show.
Broadcasting live from California. Get ready for an hour of pure, unapologetic conservative talk radio. This is the Wise Conservative Show.
Welcome back to the Wise Conservative Show. After a long week and a lot of scandalous news that has come out involving both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton and a multitude of other political figures. This week has been quite busy in various news, from Hillary Clinton proposing taxes on the middle class to Donald Trump threatening an armed revolution against Hillary Clinton, and we will cover it all. We have to start out with the usual introductions. You can find us at Spreaker.com/The Wise Conservative Show or broadcasting live at YouthRevolt.org. So now that that's out of the way, it is just me, Dakota Wise. My brother Connor had some prior engagement, so we're going to be flying solo on this episode. But with that said, let us go ahead and jump straight into the news of the week, starting, of course, with Hillary Clinton, because she's having a rough week herself. Of course, Donald Trump had a terrible, terrible week last week, but Hillary Clinton is not looking so good this week, which is why it's especially shameful that Donald Trump is still trailing in the polls, but we'll get to that. So to start out, we're going to be talking about the new ties between Hillary Clinton and the Clinton Foundation and some of the favors she was pulling for very wealthy donors during her tenure at the State Department. This news is, of course, breaking because of the newly released email conversations from Clinton's private server, despite the fact that Hillary Clinton claimed to have released all work-related emails from that unsecured server. So no surprise there. Clinton was once again caught in one of her lies. But some of these emails are just absolutely terrible. In one email exchange, an executive at the Clinton Foundation tried to put a billionaire donor, Gilbert Chagaroy, I'm probably mispronouncing that, he's a convicted money launderer. The Clinton Foundation executive was trying to put him in touch with an ambassador from Lebanon because this particular donor had interests within the country. Another email batch from April of 2009 shows that pressure was put on aides to hire a former foundation associate. Lots of corruptness going on in this foundation, and you have to remember, the Clinton Foundation itself is under federal investigation. But there's a couple of things to learn from this batch of emails. Number one, Hillary Clinton clearly did not release all of the emails that she claims to have, due to the simple fact that this is already coming out. Who knows what else was in those emails that she deleted, which contained personal information, about her family, about Chelsea. No one wanted to see her yoga or whatever else she claimed. If these are what's coming out now, I can guarantee that the emails that were able to be deleted contain some real nasty stuff. But everyone already knows that. So here's the sad thing about this story, and here's the sad thing about any of the leaks that are going to come out about Clinton, because I can guarantee there are going to be more and more devastating emails, or what should be devastating. Here's the sad, simple truth, though. Those who are willing to vote for Hillary Clinton at this point do not care what comes out. They don't care if Hillary Clinton is lying through her teeth. They don't care if Hillary Clinton stands up on a stage, says one thing, does the opposite, or if Hillary Clinton stands up on a stage and lies about everything she's saying. Because at this point, everyone knows Hillary Clinton is a liar. Everyone knows that Hillary Clinton is corrupt. Everyone knows the Clinton Foundation was being used as a money-making scheme while she was in the State Department. Everyone knows this. This is not new news. We might now have ways to actually validate those claims, but these are claims that have been out there for months now. But the people who are still willing to vote for Hillary Clinton, they don't care. News could come out that Hillary Clinton has lied about everything up until this point, and she would still get voters. At one point when Hillary Clinton was still under investigation, a study found that upwards of 80% of her voters would still be willing to vote for her if she was indicted. Now that right there proves one thing. Hillary Clinton has some loyal supporters, but the sad part is that Donald Trump is such a terrible candidate is that he can't capitalize on what is essentially the most corrupt politician who has ever run for presidential office. And she's not just corrupt in behind the scenes making backroom deals. Everyone knows that Hillary Clinton is corrupt, but we have such a obnoxiously loud and moronic Republican candidate that he cannot even capitalize on Hillary Clinton's multitude of mistakes in order to be winning this election. And that's something I wanted to cover this week. For a long time, I was a Trump supporter. And as the primary went on and as the general election has started, it's gotten much harder to defend the things that Donald Trump is saying. He's not just being not politically correct anymore. Some of the statements Donald Trump is making are just moronic, or quite frankly, he's being an asshole in a lot of them. There's a difference between being not politically correct and making a fool of yourself, but Donald Trump doesn't seem to understand that. And, people go, well, he's not a politician. He says what comes to his head. That's not a good quality. We don't like people in the real world who just say whatever comes off to their head. You need to have some sort of coherent logic behind what's coming out of your mouth. And Donald Trump is proving that he doesn't have that. So instead of this week, instead of focusing on hitting Hillary Clinton hard on these emails, on anything else Clinton has said. At one point, she apparently misspoke when she said she was going to be raising the taxes on the middle class. We should be trying to hit Clinton hard on that, but instead, Donald Trump is in the defensive. And it pains me to admit it, but a boring Jeb Bush or Marco Rubio, they're not looking half bad right now because at the very least, they'd be able to garner enough support that Hillary Clinton would not be president of the United States come next January. The same cannot be said about Donald Trump. He is doing very, very poorly at convincing those who are not already on the Trump train that they should be joining him. And it's not just his lack of support in the independents, and he's not really pulling off Democratic voters. He's not even pulling a key group of conservatives. The actual conservatives in the Republican Party are feeling ousted by Donald Trump. And his tax plan this week is perfect evidence of that. Of course, Donald Trump went for the Hail Mary, trying to break the news cycle of all the idiotic things he said last week by releasing his tax plan. And overall, you know what? It's not the worst tax plan that anyone has ever put out. The Tax Policy Center did a review, and they came to the conclusion that Donald Trump's tax reform plan would boost incentives to work, save, and invest, and that it has the potential to simplify the tax code. They went on by saying that lowering marginal tax rates and further limiting or repealing many tax expenditures would reduce the incentives and opportunities to engage in some of the forms of wasteful tax avoidance. Essentially, people would have less of a reason to try to avoid paying their fair share of taxes. However, this proposal, his tax proposal, well, yes, most taxpayers, if not all taxpayers, would be saving money. His proposal would cost the United States government astronomical amounts of money. Okay, so he's released his tax plan. He wants to lower taxes. Why hasn't he released his plan on how he's going to cut big government spending in order to accommodate the drop in revenue such a tax plan that he has proposed would create? I'm all for lowering the tax rate. Our taxes are ridiculous, but there seems to be a dirty word in Washington, and that's lowering the size of government. It seems no one's willing to do it. And here we have Donald Trump. He's going to change things up. He's going to change how things are done in Washington. Yet, the only evidence I have seen is that he might make some offhand remarks. Because at the end of the day, his tax plan is going to cost the United States government a lot of money. They were projecting that we would increase our national debt by upwards of $11 trillion during his presidency. By 2036, if we continued on the projection that his tax plan would put us at, and there was no sizable decreases in government spending, our national debt would come up to 86% of our annual GDP. 86%. That is not sustainable. And yet, here we are. There's a small group of people who are raising any sort of concern that our national debt is growing faster and faster and faster, and it's going to break at some point. Yet no one in Washington seems to be willing to balance the budgets. No one's willing to say how they're going to stop the waste and fraud and corruption. They'll throw out an idea here, an idea there, that'll maybe save a few million or, save a few $1 million. And yet they never actually have a plan on how to balance the budgets. $1 million here and $1 million there. Sure, it adds up. But we're talking about $19 trillion of debt, and it's likely to go in much higher whether Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton wins come November. Where's the person raising the alarm that this is not sustainable, that we are heading for economic disaster? There doesn't seem to be one. And I don't want to be all doom and gloom, but this is probably one of the largest issues we are facing, because we are nearly to the point where there is no turning back, where the only way to fix the national debt crisis is going to be something catastrophic. And nobody wants to experience that. No one wants to go through that. So the fact that Donald Trump is throwing out this Hail Mary of a plan is, it's in form with Donald. He's shown that he's not a far-right conservative. He's not even a moderately right conservative. Donald Trump is middle of the line. And just like all of the politicians in Washington, he wants to increase the size of the government. Yet the only difference here is that he wants to take in less money to fund his increases in government. So the Donald Trump tax plan, if we could figure out how to balance the budget with it, that would be amazing. The Tax Policy Center computed that the average middle-class American would save close to $3,000 a year in taxes. That's a lot of money. That's putting money back in people's pockets. And it has some very admirable qualities to it. He proposed lowering the corporate tax rate to 15%, which needs to be done. We have one of, if not the highest corporate tax rates in the world. And yet we're somehow wondering how we don't have more business going on here, why our jobs are going overseas. It's because companies cannot afford to do business here. We need to be giving incentives for companies to stay here. If Donald Trump has been a fan of things like tariffs and his protectionistic economy, that's fine and dandy. But to do that, we need to be ensuring that we have a competitive marketplace for businesses in the first place. And so lowering that corporate tax rate would do a lot to help create that friendly environment for businesses. But I'm just concerned, because Donald Trump has thrown a lot out there of what he would do. Lowering the amount of money that government is spending is not one of them. So that concerns me because that will come back to bite us. Mark my words, we will regret going into this national debt hole when we can no longer climb our way out of it. But as a whole, without the doom and gloom, not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I really was, at this point, expecting Donald Trump to throw out something totally ridiculous, because that's pretty much how the campaign's gone. But if he finds a way to balance the budget, it would be very good. Of course, Clinton wasted no time in hitting it, saying, Donald Trump was lowering the taxes on wealthy Americans and that they would no longer be paying their fair share. That's just ridiculous. Folks, that's the hatred that the left has for anyone who has more money than them is astonishing. And you can see them play into the fear and the jealousy and hatred that middle income and lower income families have against these wealthy families in America. They really like to target them. Our economy would be better if the people who make X amount of money pay more in taxes. Well, folks, the way taxes work, if you're doing it on percent, if they're more wealthy, they're already paying more money than you. If everyone in America paid 10%, Donald Trump would be paying a whole lot more in taxes than Joe the mechanic down the street. They're already paying their fair share. I don't see it reasonable for a government to ever take 40, 50% of someone's income. I don't care how much money they're making. I don't care how they're making it. I don't need to sit here and justify they've earned it. They've worked hard. I don't need to make that justification. It is ridiculous for half of someone's money to be going to fund a government when, quite frankly, those who are in the wealthiest group aren't even using all the services that the government has to offer. Yet they're funding these huge social programs when they're not using them. And it's ridiculous for anyone to pay that much taxes, especially when you start to consider how much we pay based off sales taxes. Then you have state income taxes, property taxes. We are taxed for everything. I mean, for goodness sake, I went fishing this week and I had to buy a fishing license. A license paying money to the government in order to fish on public property that my tax dollars is funding. But here's the ridiculous part. We paid sales tax on our government, on our money that was going to the government to fish from public lands that our tax dollars were funding. That right there it's like 4 taxes on the half-pound fish that I ended up catching. That's not okay. That's not how the United States was founded. Our government was never supposed to be so far-reaching that people were giving more of their money to the government than they were keeping for themselves. That was never something that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson sat down and thought sounded like a good idea. And yet, that's to the point that we've gotten. And it's only going to get worse. If Hillary Clinton wins, it's only going to get worse. We're going to see things like single-payer health care start to become a reality. And we, as a nation, despite all these taxes we pay, we have a lot of people, and we're borrowing a lot of money. So the real question becomes, the Democrats aren't raising taxes because they want to end our national debt. They don't want to put a dent in it. They're raising these taxes to cover maybe a quarter of the costs of the new social programs that they want to implement. Why are the Republicans raising money? That is yet to be seen. They're lowering taxes, yet many of them want to increase the size of the government as well. It's astonishing, and it's unsustainable, and it's wrong. That's not how a government should work. But so after, we're going to take a quick break, and after the break, we're going to talk about Hillary Clinton. Again, it seems that she might have been allowing Russian companies and the government the Russian government, to conduct espionage on American companies so that a Russian Silicon Valley could be created. Don't go anywhere. This is the Wise Conservative Show. Thanks for being here.
And that, class, is why America is the worst country in the history of the world.
Are you sick of your professors telling you lies?
Now remember, children, if you're white, it means you're privileged. Don't ever forget that.
Do you sit through class convinced that your head is going to explode at any given moment? Sounds like you could use some backup. Visit youthrevolt.org for exclusive content produced by young conservatives for young conservatives. Youth Revolt features a dedicated team of radio hosts, political columnists, and video bloggers, all of whom are 100% committed to taking back the future of this country. So what are you waiting for? Tune out your Marxist professor and visit youthrevolt.org now.
8 years with Obama, and now no one knows what bathroom to use.
The Wise Conservative Show, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Only on Youth Revolt.
Tune in to Millennials Rising, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time on Sunday nights, for a conservative outlook on pop culture and American politics. Together we can reinstitute values back into our nation's young people and help create an alternative path away from the mainstream liberal agenda. Tune in to Millennials Rising, 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, Sunday nights, only on Youth Revolt. The idea behind Youth Revolt is to let them, these liberal professors, let them know that we are here and we're ready to fight.
Youth Revolt. Speak without fear.
Hey, little boy, you want some free college?
Bernie Sanders, that creepy uncle your mom warned you about. The Wise Conservative Show. Wednesdays at 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Only on Youth Revolt. Welcome back to the Wise Conservative Show. My name is Dakota Wise. Following that short commercial break, I want to talk about Hillary Clinton and her role in the what is being called corporate espionage involving what is known as the Russian Silicon Valley. So during her tenure in the State Department, Hillary Clinton pitched an idea which was supposed to be a partnership involving the U.S. and Russian government and U.S. and Russian companies. The goal of this was part of that wacky reset button that Hillary Clinton pressed in Russia. This was all a part of that quote-unquote reset with Russia. The idea was for major U.S. corporations like Boeing, Google, GE, Cisco, and Microsoft, they were to invest money, more than $1 billion, into a tech park located just outside Moscow. The goal, as was stated by Hillary Clinton, was to break down barriers with Russia and create more free flow of people and information between our two countries. So basically, ultimately, try to catch Russia back up with us because clearly they've lagged in so many areas after the post-war era. So Hillary Clinton solicited these huge corporations which incidentally, 17 out of the 28 involved were donors to the Clinton Foundation. But she solicited these companies in order to try to get them to partner with the Russian government and Russian corporations. Yet, this may have launched some of these companies into the realm of corporate espionage. During 2014, the FBI issued a warning to companies doing business in this tech park that it could be placing them unwittingly into danger of being spied upon. Now, that's dangerous because a lot of these corporations are handling things that are pivotal to our national security. Boeing, Microsoft, Cisco, GE, they're all involved in military production, in research and development. They all have their top secret programs. And yet, these companies, which were being used to, quote-unquote, reset with Russia, were being spied upon the entire time by the Russian government and by Russian companies. And yet Hillary Clinton didn't ever think that this could be an outcome of trying to establish these sort of relationships with someone who is clearly not our ally. So this report is coming out from Peter Schweizer, who is, of course, the author of the best-selling book Clinton Cash, which tried to create links on just some of the corrupt dealings Hillary Clinton conducted during her time as Secretary of State. So clearly, Peter Schweizer is not a huge Clinton fan. So take that information as a grain of salt, if you will. But I'm not surprised. Hillary Clinton, whether or not she was actively trying to help out the Russian government, I don't think so. Hillary Clinton has no justification. She has no reward for doing so, unless, of course, there was some sort of money involved. Hillary Clinton has proven she's willing to do just about anything if it involves a payday. What's concerning, concerning for those of us who are still able to think, Hillary Clinton has shown a real lack of ability when it comes to national security, whether it was her unsecured email server, whether it was the death of 4 Americans in Benghazi, the destabilization of Libya, the rise of ISIS, now the information that's coming out which shows that American companies were being hacked and spied upon while we were supposed to be helping Russia's economy grow under a program set up by Hillary Clinton. Am I surprised by any of this that's coming out now? Not a little bit. We know just how terrible Hillary Clinton is. She claims to have the most experience, yet everything Hillary Clinton has touched has turned into lies, corruption, deceit. None of her experience is remotely acceptable. None of it has resulted in any good outcomes for any of the parties involved except for herself, because she always finds a way to make money off of it. And so is she going to do that sort of stuff as president? Of course. Once a crook, always a crook. But I can only sit here and call Hillary Clinton a liar, call her a crook, point these out for so long because people aren't listening. I talked about it earlier. It's sad. So many Americans don't care what she's done. So many Americans will refuse to vote for Donald Trump. They'll vote for Hillary Clinton because of the things that Donald Trump has said, but they don't care about the lies, the deceit, the corruption, the deaths that follow Hillary Clinton. And this is not just conspiracy stuff. Hillary Clinton is the embodiment of everything wrong with government, and people do not care. So I want to finish up the presidential race segment, the first half of the show, with the story that has gotten Donald Trump in some hot water again. Of course, during his rally this week, one of his rallies this week, he referenced that Hillary Clinton would create a court that would essentially rid Americans of the Second Amendment, which is a valid point. Hillary Clinton, of course, has bragged about receiving an F from the NRA. She's bragged about wanting to limit Americans' right to own guns. So that was a valid statement by Donald Trump. He's taking heat for the fact that he said that Americans who enjoyed their Second Amendment, who owned firearms, wouldn't allow her, or might not allow her, to abolish the Second Amendment, which I don't see the controversy of. Heaven forbid we ever get to this point. Let's just hope we never go down this road. If at some point, though, the government was trying to remove our Second Amendment rights, would there be an armed uprising? I can't say yes. I can't say no for sure. But at some point, you have to think, as Americans, when does enough become enough? And when the government starts to try to take away our ability to resist their tyranny, that is when I would consider enough. And I'm 100% positive a lot of Americans would feel the same way. So is what Donald Trump said inciting violence? No, I don't think so. If that was inciting violence, half the quotes that come out from the Founding Fathers would be considered inciting violence, because half of the things they said were about overthrowing tyrannical regimes. And if the United States government gets to the point where they're crossing out the Second Amendment, you can guarantee that we have gotten ourselves a tyrannical regime at that point. So was it wise of Donald Trump to say, at this point, it doesn't hurt him? I sound so pessimistic this week, don't I? But at this point, really, I mean, the people who hate him already hate him. The people who don't hate him don't hate him. I think this election is going to come down to who gets the voter turnout, who can inspire people to get out to the polls. And that ability we'll have to see. Donald Trump did very well in the primaries at getting people excited to vote for him. If he does it in November, he might be able to take the election despite polling significantly lower than Hillary Clinton. A lot of Hillary Clinton's voters don't go out to the voter booth. Lower income voters especially are notoriously terrible at showing up to vote, versus a lot of Donald Trump's demographic is feeling motivated and inspired, and a lot of them might just show up to the voter booth for the first time in a long time. So that will play a significant role in this election. Whether or not that's enough to make up for some of the things that Donald Trump has said and done, and his almost 10-point and Hillary Clinton's 10-point lead on Trump, well, that will have to wait until November to see. There's 90 days until then, over 90 days, I believe. That's a long time, and a lot can change. So we'll have to just keep reevaluating that as the season goes on. So coming off of the presidential news, the presidential race news, I want to finish this episode talking about why a secular government inherently does not work in the United States, why removing God or religion from everything to do with the government, from public schools all the way down to, taking "In God We Trust" off our money, why that is fundamentally against how this nation was established, and why it's a danger to our constitutional rights. This is something I heard talked about a lot at the conservative conference I went to in D.C. 2 weeks ago. And it blew my mind. Some of these speakers brought up points that I have just never considered. This is one of them. And I can guarantee that they were much, much better at talking about this subject and much more eloquent than I will be. But I want to talk about it because there's recent news coming out that at a school that a high school football coach was fired because he led his team in prayer before the game. So let's go ahead and talk about why God or religion in general, any sort of religion, is necessary and why it's a good thing for the United States government. So we as conservatives like to talk a lot about, let me give this disclaimer. I don't talk about a religion a lot on here. I'm not a perfect Christian. Everyone does their best. I don't like to ram my beliefs down people's throats. At this point in society, everyone knows about God. Everyone knows about church. If they want to go to church, if they want to have a relationship with God, that's their business. But I want to talk about this because this is vital in maintaining some of the social values we hold, some of the constitutional rights we hold. So I'm going to throw out my rule that I don't talk about religion on here, and I'm going to talk about it now. So we as conservatives like to focus on the Constitution. We know that the Constitution is what establishes the government. It's what sets its boundaries, what it can do. And most importantly, it protects the rights that the government cannot take from us. So that's something that we as conservatives value very highly. Yet, by only looking at the Constitution, we are ignoring a huge part of the story. For the Constitution might set up the rights of the government, the rights of the people, what the government can do, and what they cannot touch. It might set all that up, but it doesn't talk about who gives those rights to us, the people. It doesn't talk about who gives us those fundamental rights that are so important that we had to write them down to ensure the government would never impede upon them. So to look at who the Founding Fathers believe gave us those rights, we have to look to the Declaration of Independence. And so the Declaration of Independence, in the second paragraph, before it lists the grievances against King George, says this simple statement that is absolutely vital for protecting our rights. And the Declaration of Independence says, and I quote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal," and here's the important part, "and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Our constitutional rights, our Bill of Rights, they're not given to us by the government. They're not given to us by other men. They are fundamentally given to us by the being that has created us all. And so that right there is absolutely important. It is not other men. It is not the government that gives us the rights that we as Americans enjoy. That's important, and that's what sets the United States apart from so many other countries. A lot of countries have set themselves up with rights very similar to America, and yet we as the United States are still the only country that fully enjoys those rights. So why is it? Well, we can look to the French Revolution to see why the mention of a creator giving us those rights is so important. The French Revolution, of course, was founded in principles very, very closely to those that the American Revolution was founded upon and fought for. But, of course, there was a key difference. The French Revolution was fought on the premise of liberty, equality, and fraternity. So if you look to the French Revolution, it failed, ultimately. It failed. Despite the fact that one of the greatest reasons the French Revolution occurred was that the French soldiers coming home from helping the United States gain their independence from Britain were so inspired upon by seeing the freedoms that we as Americans were fighting for at that time. So despite that fact, the French Revolution resulted in Napoleon, and ultimately it failed at creating a democratic society, or a democratic society that enjoys the freedoms we enjoy. So what's so key about why this failed? Number one, it talks about freedom, or it talks about liberty, but then it goes on to talk about equality. Now, in a perfect world, that might be okay, but in the real world, liberty and equality do not coexist. Where one has freedom to make their own choices, to do as they please, do business as they please, work as they please, there will be no equality. So, in the real world, liberty and absolute equality are mutually exclusive. Now, this is, of course, in an aspect of society. You have to have equality under law. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about absolute equality as a society. What the Communist Manifesto was basically about, creating a society that was based on equality. What socialism tries to achieve, a society based on equality. And yet, when you look at liberty, which is essentially giving people the freedom to do as they please, in fact, the actual definition for liberty is described in the dictionary as freedom from control, interference, obligation, restriction, hampering, conditions, etc. The power or right of doing, thinking, speaking according to choice. Doing, speaking, and thinking according to choice. When people in a society are free to do, think, and speak as they please, they will not end life equally. Some have more drive, they have more motivation, they want to try to make money, while others would try to have a family. Whatever they want to do in a society based upon liberty, they are free to do so, and that is why socialism and communism are so fundamentally against everything that our revolution was fought for. We are a nation grounded and rooted in liberty, and so the idea that all people need to be equal is fundamentally against the idea of liberty. So that's number one. That's the number one reason why the French Revolution failed. But that's not the biggest reason it failed. For the French Revolution didn't last long enough to see the effects of trying to create an equal society be its downfall. Instead, we have to look to their third principle, fraternity. The idea that their rights that they were fighting this revolution for were given to them by their other peers, by the men around them, by the fraternity that bonded them together as a country. This is where the French Revolution failed, because when you have men, when you have government being the people who give you your rights, that means they can be taken away. When you have rights given from a god or a creator, they cannot be changed by man. But when you have man giving another man a right, they can and will be changed over time. Man evolves, man changes, but God-given rights do not change. So that is what is key for the United States. That is why the Declaration of Independence is key. And people say, well, that's not a legal law-abiding document. And sure, that's true. But we have to look in the Constitution as it was the frame of mind of the Founding Fathers when they were writing it, to understand it. And when they talk about rights, fundamental rights for American citizens, they are talking about rights given by a creator, by a God. And that is why they cannot be taken or changed by government. Those 10 fundamental rights, the Bill of Rights, these were the rights that the Founding Fathers thought were so pivotal that they were given to us by a God. That is what sets the United States apart. The idea that God or a creator is who gives us our rights. Now, I'm not saying that everyone in the country needs to be a Christian. You can apply this to any sort of creator you want. You don't need to apply it to anyone if you want. But at the end of the day, that is what the Founding Fathers were thinking when they wrote the Constitution, when they set out what the government could do and what it could not do. So that's important to understand as conservatives. Our rights are given to us by our creator, not the government. So it is not the government's place to take away rights that is not theirs to take in the first place. So I want to finish up this segment in the show with discussion on the introduction to this about the football coach who was fired for leading his football team in prayer, and some of the response I saw to this on some of the comments on news websites is just absolutely astonishing to me. So first of all, some of the responses I saw were calling this coach. They were going as far to say, clearly this coach has no sort of human conscience or morality, because not all of his players were Christian. So it's apparently morally wrong to pray with someone who is not a Christian or who does not have a belief in any sort of God. What I don't understand is when praying became so offensive. Is it so offensive to people who do not believe in God to suggest that that there might be a creator out there, that we're not just a result of some random chemical experiment? Is it so offensive that they have to sit there for 10 seconds and listen to a prayer talking about their safe being in a football game? As someone who is, if someone was not religious, they should not be offended that someone is praying for something to happen, for the safety of kids in a football game. This is not something that should be offensive. As a Christian, you're not praying to be offensive. It's not to be seen as throwing something down someone's throat. It's a gesture of goodwill. It's something that we believe is there to help. We're not trying to hurt anyone. We're not trying to offend anyone. It's a sign of respect and gratitude that we're praying for these people. And yet they take it as this, I want to point to the left atheists who are so offended by anything to do with religion or God, and who go around trying to say, we need to be removing in God we trust off of everything. They're so offended by the prospect that there might be a God out there, that they might just have gotten things wrong, and when they die, their atheism or whatever they believe in isn't going to help them at all. They're so offended by the thought that they might be wrong that they don't want to let people pray before a football game. That's not forcing anyone to be a Christian. You can sit there. You don't have to bow your head. You don't have to close your eyes. Sit there quietly for 10 seconds, 20 seconds, and listen to the prayer. Pretend that it's not to God. Pretend they're just, thinking out loud. Whatever. Okay? It's not an offensive thing. And it is a sad reflection on society that we have gotten to the point where even mentioning God in a school is enough to get you fired. This was not a coach trying to indoctrinate his students with Christian beliefs or ideas. It was a coach trying to pray for the safety of his players. And that's enough in this twisted secular society we live in to have you fired from your job. That right there, this has been somewhat of a pessimistic show, but that right there is probably the saddest reflection on our society today. We were founded on Christian principles and beliefs in this country, and yet we couldn't be going further and further away from them. If we have to actively be trying to, because things are getting crazy out there. The world has gone insane. But anyway, folks, that just about wraps up this episode of the Wise Conservative Show. I'd like to thank you for tuning in. Now I'm obligated to do our little closing spiel. You can find us at youthrevolt.org or Facebook. You just search up Youth Revolt. We're also broadcasting at Spreaker.com/The Wise Conservative Show. You can follow us there. Or if you never want to miss an episode, you can subscribe to us in the iTunes podcast store. Just search The Wise Conservative Show. And of course, the best part is that it's free. You can also find us on YouTube, SoundCloud, yada, yada, yada. Anyway, folks, I want to thank you for being here. This has been a quick episode. Lots to talk about, but I'm glad you could make it. And until next time, my name is Dakota Wise. And as always, thank you and God bless.